Then, having shared that information with you, let's dive into our new collection. It's going to be a very short collection, as you already might have inferred by what I've been telling you. And this collection is titled Symbolism and Irony. And the interesting thing about symbolism and irony is that they are elements of literature, but they are not essential elements of literature. Like, for example, a plot is something you cannot do without. You cannot have a work of literature, a story, without a plot. You cannot have a story without character. You cannot have story without theme. You cannot have story without setting. You cannot have story without many other things. Symbolism is something that is not essential, but it is a great ingredient to use if you're cooking a piece of writing. It is fantastic. There are stories that have symbolism. There are stories that do not have symbolism. The same way there are stories that have irony. There are stories that do not have irony. But symbolism and irony give a lot of flavor to a piece of writing. They add a lot of value, a literary value, to a piece of writing. So let's see what symbolism is all about. As you already know, the presentations are in a PowerPoint version in my website, which is the one that I usually recommend that you watch instead of the PDF, because the PowerPoint has the animations and it has sometimes they have links and things like that. So in this cover sheet of the presentation, uh, do you notice anything particular?
Signs on the board.
Well, there's actually symbols. They are symbols, exactly, because they are animated GIFs. Some of them are moving in the PowerPoint presentation, and here you cannot appreciate that this is supposed to be a cross, but the cross is like we have like a side view, so it looks like a stick. But in the PowerPoint, you can see that it is a cross. And we have different symbols here. These figures all have different meanings. Let's look at this dove, for example. Depending on what part of the world you're from, you will appreciate the dove in a different way. It's just a simple dove, but if you were a New Yorker and you would look at this dove, you will probably be getting upset and angry and hateful toward the dove because New Yorkers hate doves. Why? Well, they poop on your cars, they poop on everything. So when a New Yorker sees a dove, they think poop. If you were an Egyptian, then you would be going yummy because in Egypt, fried stuffed pigeon is very much appreciated in Egyptian cuisine. It would be like your typical lunch. It's like having a hot dog or having a hamburger in America. So you can see that um, that is just a bird. It is what it is, but to different people, it means something different. A meaning has been ascribed to this animal. It's just an animal like any other animal, so like a snake or like a frog or a possum, but because different people have ascribed meaning to it, it means different things, and it causes different reactions in different kinds of people. There's an idea that is associated to it, right? We are familiar with images like these, for example. These are also what we call symbols. And when we look at them, we think about things that do not necessarily have to do anything with them intrinsically speaking. Like, for example, you look at this symbol And what are you thinking? Some people might think in an email. What else? Yeah, the internet. Exactly, the internet. Now, was this symbol created for email or for the internet, or did it exist before? Anybody? Well, in case you didn't know, this symbol's been around for like centuries, for a long time. So it's not necessarily something that throughout history has had to do anything to do with the internet. For us, for you guys, for me, well, we think quickly, and the internet and email because we associate it with that. Um, what about this symbol? What do you see there? But it's just a skull and bones. It's a skull and bones. But we associate that with death, but it's just a skull. It's just a part of a skeleton. That's all it is. And what about this here? What is this? The Apple company logo, but an apple is an apple. It's just a fruit. Uh, and what does it mean for apple? You look at that and you think, okay, apple, like Mikael said, but why does Apple use that? Why do they use an apple? Why don't they call themselves Mango Company? Why not the Banana Company or the Strawberry Company? Why Apple? Anybody? It is used as a symbol, has been traditionally used for centuries, for millennia, as a symbol of knowledge. And this one is bitten. So it probably means forbidden knowledge. And it elicits memories from the Bible, from the book of Genesis, when Eve, the first woman, ate from the forbidden tree, right? From the forbidden tree of the knowledge of good and evil that was forbidden by God for her to eat from that. Um, we don't know if it was an apple tree or what fruit it was, but some people in the past thought it was an apple tree. Okay, so it stuck. But whatever ideas we prescribe to these things we're looking at are not intrinsic, do not come from themselves. It is something that is prescribed to them. They are symbols. And what is a symbol? A symbol is something such as an object, a picture, a written word, a sound, or a particular mark that represents something else by association, resemblance, or convention. In other words, it's something that stands for something else. For example, if you look at a red octagon in any part of the world, a red octagon is a red octagon, but we have prescribed a meaning to it. And what's the meaning? Well, stop. Whether you're in China or whether you're in France or whether you're in Aguada, they mean the same thing. Um, you might look at maps and you'll see cross sabers. What does that mean? That's probably a historical battlefield. I mean, like Gettysburg or something like that. You can go and visit that place. Um, numbers are symbols. Numerals are symbols for numbers. The letters of the alphabet are also symbols. Language, that's why language consists of symbols. And personal names are symbols that represent individual. You have a name, that's a symbol. Maybe your name is an invented name, or maybe it's a more traditional name that has meaning. For example, my name means something. I don't know if you know what the meaning of your name is. Um, let's look at a video that I found in the internet about some symbols. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So there you have it, guys. There are many symbols out there, right? Now, there's something called symbolism, and that has to do with how we use symbols, right? Symbolism can be defined as an investing of outward things or actions with an inner meaning. And so, again, we prescribe an outward meaning to something. Does anybody recognize that symbol? Is the symbol for infinity. It's like if number 8 fainted and fell to the ground. Well, that's basically uh, what it means. Not intrinsically. Someone decided that, yeah, that's what it's going to mean, and everybody else accepted that. Symbolism is used in literature. It is used when an author uses an object or reference to add deeper meaning to a story. Symbolism in literature can be subtle, it can be obvious, it can be used sparingly, or it can be used heavily handed. Symbolism is usually used to support a literary theme. In literature, symbolism is used when a writer inserts symbols into their writing or allude to a feeling, a mood, or an attitude without directly stating the perspective or mood intended. Symbolism is, as I said earlier, supplemental to a story. It is something you can use to enhance a story the same way that you can use spices to enhance your food. But are they necessary? Well, no, but they can make a reading much more interesting. Examples of symbolism that we find in literary work can include, for example, fire and flames or heat as symbols of damnation, or crosses, angels, halos, clouds, and churches as symbols of salvation. We can also see things like the phoenix rising from the flames or the ashes, crosses, rainbows, a passing storm, a dawn or a sunrise, or broken chains as symbols of reincarnation or reinvention, of change for the better, in other words. And we can see things such as gravestones, cemeteries, the Grim Reaper, a Day of the Dead, skulls, like we already saw, with crossbones in the bottom, candles blowing out, coffins, or ringing bells as symbols of death or ending. None of the things that I mentioned carry that meaning by themselves. These meanings have been prescribed to them by people, and they have been accepted by different societies and different cultures. We can look at symbols two different ways. We could say there are two types of symbols. There's a type of symbol that we're going to call inherited. And inherited symbols are those that have been passed down through time. Like, for example, you have a lion there. And for millennia, this beast, this lion, has become associated with power and courage. And a lion is a big cat. A lion is a lion. But there's something about the lion. I mean, you look at a lion, and looking at a lion is not the same thing as looking at a hippo. The way that the lion carries himself is not the same way that a hippo or rhinoceros carry themselves. The lion has like a certain grace, like a certain majesty and power that we have always associated with royalty. That's why when you look at some shields around the world, especially shields of countries that have kings or monarchs or queens, you see a lion there because we associate them with this power, this majesty, this courage. And not only does the symbol of the lion appear in the crests or shields of countries that have a monarch, but also as a mascot or a symbol of schools, universities, and other institutions and flags. The other type of symbol is what we call the invented symbol. At the end of the day, all symbols are invented. There's no such thing as a symbol that is not invented. But the difference between what we call an invented symbol and an inherited symbol has to do with time. How many of you recognize the symbols that you see there? I mean, look at the first one. You look at the first one, what comes to your mind? But and you see what we're saying here. What in the world does fried chicken have to do with an old guy? The fried chicken. So we're making an association here. Why is that a symbol not of fried chicken? Maybe some of you are already drooling, thinking of it because maybe you love it so much, and you're just looking at an old guy there. And the reason is because he's the guy that invented the recipe. He became like the icon, like the mascot. And whenever you go to a KFC, that's what you're seeing. So we make that association. So association is the name of the game when we're talking about symbols. And in the advertising world, symbols are used a lot because symbols are like catchy and they're easy to remember. Okay, and they have like this big underlying cultural connection that helps us remember these symbols. So invented symbols are symbols that will eventually become inherited symbols. Eventually, we have to give them time. If KSC is still around for the next 100 or 200 years, well, guess what? It will become an inherited symbol. But because it's more of our generation, we don't call it that. There's a type of symbol that is used a lot in literature that's called the allegory. And the allegory is like the extension of a metaphor so that an object, person, or action in a text are equated with meaning that is outside of the story. So that means that for you to understand an allegory, you have to be a little bit smart or at least well read. You cannot be a person that lives in their own bubble and is like so disassociated from culture and civilization. Like some people are that when you ask them and they don't know nothing, no, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. A person like that will never get an allegory or understand it. You need to be a person that needs to know of certain things. Um, Let me give you an example. In seventh grade, when we used to give literature, you know, what we teach now is writing. We used to read a story titled Antaeus. And you read story and you never see the word Antaeus ever again. You just see it in the title and the rest of the story. And you're wondering, well, why is it called Antaeus? And what did that have to do with anything? The story is about this boy from, I think he's from Georgia, one of these states, a very rural area. And he's an orphan and he ends up in an orphanage in New York City. He's from the country to the city. And it's a very different thing. How many of you have been to New York? I mean, you compare New York to Puerto Rico, right? And to Moca or Aguada or Isabela, it's night and day. It's night and day. So this boy is very sullen. He's very quiet. He hangs out with the other kids. They're more rowdy because they're New Yorkers. They're loud and all that. Very extroverted and always playing. And one day he says something to the group of boys. They're playing on top of an abandoned building, an abandoned factory. And he comes up with the idea of everybody pitching in money so they can go to a warehouse store, buy some dirt, buy seeds, and they make like a little project. And on the roof, they throw all this dirt and they throw the seeds, and then it starts getting grassy. And it looks like it's country like now in cement jungle, which is what New York is. It's a jungle made of cement, barren, lifeless. Now, this boy from the countryside, you see that he's starting like to become more alive, and he looks happier. And the kids are very happy because they never played in grass. And it feels so cool. They take their socks off and they walk on the grass and all that. It feels like a carpet. And they're very, very happy, especially the boy, um, because he feels like he's back home where he's from. One day they come back and they find that everything was ripped off and destroyed. And the security guards start chasing them because they are going to reopen the factory. They were like fixing it and all that, and they saw all that in the roof. And they say, "Wait a minute, we have to get rid of this junk because it's going to mess up the roof." And they ripped it apart. And at the end of the story, the boy ran away, and the boys never saw him again. They heard that the police found him, I don't know where. The end. Now, we never hear the word Antaeus ever again. If you know Greek mythology, then it starts to make sense. How many of you like Greek mythology? Nobody else. I grew up with that stuff. That was, when I was a kid, that was my stuff, mythology, especially Greek mythology. Those of you that said that you like Greek mythology, have you ever heard of Antaeus? No. Have you ever heard of the Titans? Well, Antaeus was a Titan. The Titans are the old gods before the Olympians. They were defeated in the Titanomachia by the Olympic gods, and one of those Titans was Antaeus. And of all the Titans, Antaeus was Mama's boy. Remember that the mother of the Titans was the goddess Gaia. And who's Gaia? Anybody? If you know your Greek mythology, Gaia is what? I thought you knew Greek mythology. Words like geography, like words like geology come from Gaia.
The earth?
The earth. She's Mother Earth. That's what she is. She's Mother Earth. So he had this special connection to his mommy, Gaia, Mother Earth. And as long as he was in contact with the earth, he was invincible. And have you ever heard of Heracles? Better known as
Yeah.
Hercules. Okay, the Greek name is Heracles. You know him as Hercules. Well, Hercules, you know that Hercules had to do 12 labors. And what are the 12 labors that he did? He had to fight this guy. And this guy was beating the snot out of Hercules. And some people think that Hercules is just a muscle bound dope guy with no brains. And no, you're mistaken. He was a strong guy, but he was a very smart guy too. So while he's battling Antaeus and getting beat by Antaeus, he remembered that he was invincible while he was connected to his mom. So what Hercules decided to do was he grabbed Antaeus, lifted him up in the air, and so Antaeus would not be stepping on the earth anymore, on the ground anymore. And he squeezed him and squeezed him and squeezed him until he killed him. And that's how Hercules defeated Antaeus. Having said this, do you see any connection between what I have just said and the story I just mentioned about the boy? It destroyed. It destroyed him. It destroyed him, like Antaeus. So this boy had a connection to the earth, and while he was connected to the earth, like Antaeus, he was alive. When that connection was severed, that destroyed him emotionally, right? In this case, emotionally. So if you know the legend, if you know the myth, you'll understand why the story is called Antaeus. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know about Antaeus until I read the story. I was like, wait a minute, well, what's going on here? I had to investigate, and that's how I found out. So I was not as smart as I thought I was. If I would have known my mythology better, which I thought I was a master of, and apparently I was not, I would have recognized it as soon as I read it. Well, that's how allegories work. They have a meaning that comes from outside of the work. So if you know other things and then you read the text and you know that, oh, now I see it. And it's like a surprise. It's like when you're eating uh, a lollipop and you have the surprise at the end, the chewing gum. It's like a surprise, like hey. So it's great when you have allegory. There are many famous allegories. The one that comes to my mind is very famous work of Christianity known as the Pilgrim's Voyage, or the Pilgrim's Progress. I mean, the Pilgrim's Progress. If you know your Bible, when you read the Pilgrim's Progress, you go, okay, you understand everything. It's an allegory. And allegories are used a lot in books and in cinema. Uh, if you have seen films like Avatar, for example, Avatar is an allegory for the war in Iraq and the war in Iran. And not only an allegory for that, it's also an allegory for um, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. And another movie that's an allegory that people find confounding, but it's because people are not as smart as they think they are. It's a movie called Mother, which it can be a bit confusing, right? That came out recently. Animal Farm is another allegory. And The Lord of the Flies, if you read The Lord of the Flies, that's another allegory also.